Hey guys, week 6, God Speaks. So this week, I'm going to be doing a different message. I know I mentioned that I was going to do Romans 6, but sometimes God changes my message. He leads me in a different direction. So this week, this message is going to be called "Be Still and Know That I Am God." And I got to get that scripture number right, but just look it up because just look it up by the title. But anyways, because I come across some articles with Hong Kong, with Southeast Asia and India, and basically, excuse me, sorry, I'm so sorry. Basically, they were given a choice to turn their back on Christ or to be persecuted. In Hong Kong, they were given a choice to turn their back on Christ, or they would get their welfare and their benefits taken away, get their funding taken away. Some of them went in starvation. Some of them chose to go back to basically in Hong Kong praise this governor or whatever. I can't think of his name. And then in Southeast Asia and India, they were asked to go back to Islamic faith or be persecuted or be tormented or be thrown out of their homes. There was crosses torn down. There was Bibles thrown out. There was all sorts of things ripped from their homes that basically were of God or of Jesus. And this is bad. This is bad. But the thing is, if I was going through this, I'd be in somewhat of panic, but I would trust God, and I'd either believe, well, I'm either going home, or God's going to bring me through this because He's brought me through so much, and I'm not going to turn my back on Christ, not after what He's done. And here's the thing: I've had moments to where I've just wanted to give up. I've just wanted to let go of my faith, but I never could. So why would I now? And why would I if I went through the same thing that Hong Kong and Southeast Asia and India is going through right now? So basically, He put me in this position, and He asked me, what would you do? And I said, I would not turn my back on you. Not after what you've done in my life. Not after what you're doing. Not after what you're going to do. So I'm going to take you through different stories, and I'm going to show you how God came through for each and every one of these people. The first story is the story of Cain. And if you know the story, Cain had a brother, and his name was Abel. Abel loved God with his heart, with his mind, with his life. Cain loved God, but at the same time, his heart was not in the right place. They both brought a sacrifice to God. Cain's intention was, I'm going to do better than my brother. I'm going to give God a better sacrifice than what Abel did. But Abel brought his sacrifice with everything in his heart, his life, with everything in his being. And his sacrifice was accepted. So Cain grew angry. And God knew that. And God came to Cain and He said, why are you angry? Don't you know that your sacrifice will be accepted as well? God gave him a choice. he gave him an opportunity to let go of his anger. He gave him an opportunity to let go of the bad intentions that was about to happen from this anger. Because sometimes when we let our intentions get the best of us, our anger, our frustration, or whatever emotion we're going through, bad things can happen if we're not careful, if we don't keep ourselves in check. And this is what happened. Cain asked Abel to come out into the field and meet him. So he did. And when Abel's back was turned, Cain killed his brother. God knew that Cain had killed his brother. So he called out to Cain, "Where is your brother?" And Cain said, "I don't know where my brother is. Am I my brother's keeper?" But Abel's blood started calling out to God. And then God asked Cain, "Why is your brother's blood calling out to me? What is this that you have done?" So he was stripped of his job as a farmer, and he was stripped of everything that he had, and he was cast out to go out on his own. And here's the thing, here's the crazy thing. He had one request. He said, "If I go out on my own with nothing to protect me, then I could be met by robbers and they could kill me. I could be met by people and they could kill me or harm me." So God put a word on Cain that if any man even touched the hair of his head, then they would die. So his request was met because he asked God to basically protect him, even after he murdered his own brother. And God met his request. "Be still and know that I am God." Everybody knows the story of Moses. The children of Israel were enslaved by King Pharaoh and all his people. So God knew that his children had to be rescued. So he sent a man named Moses to rescue the children of Israel. And each time Moses came to Pharaoh saying, "Let my people go," or suffer from he didn't say a plague, but he said, or suffer, or God will bring something upon the land. So each time God brought a different plague. He brought plagues of frogs. He brought plagues of lice. He brought plagues of locusts. When he brought plagues of locusts, all the plants were eaten up. Everything green was gone. He turned the waters to blood. And the worst of them all was when a dark spirit came over the land and took the firstborn of every family. But during all this, the children of Israel were protected because they were God's people. They were protected. God protected his people. But Pharaoh had met the end of his rope. He said, "Take your people and go away from me." But then Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And so he came after the children of Israel with his men, with every soldier that he had, with every horse, with every carriage, with every weapon that he had, to go and get the children of Israel, to bring them back, to continue them on the work that he had them doing. Moses parted the Red Sea, and the children of Israel and Moses and all those people walked through the Red Sea as it was parted. And when they came to safety, as Pharaoh and his men were trying to cross, the Red Sea came back to its original form and it drowned every single one of them. And during this time, by day, a pillar of cloud led the children of Israel, and by night, a pillar of fire led the children of Israel. Be still and know that I am God. God protected his people. You may not be familiar with this next story. Then again, you may. The story of Esther. The king of Persia had a wife, but she was dishonoring him. Back then, when you were summoned by the king, you had to go, or you'd be cast out of your rulehood. So, the king of Persia cast his wife out and searched for a new wife and had a contest and put each of the firstborn daughter from each family throughout the land through different trials. And during that time, spent time with each and every one of them. He fell in love with a girl named Hadassah. But before she even went to this contest, her cousin suggested that she change her name because Hadassah was too Jewish of a name. And the Persians were against the Jews. Matter of fact, some Jews were enslaved by the Persians. So he changed her name to Esther. She was chosen as the queen of Persia. Well, Haman was the right-hand man of King Xerxes, which was the king of Persia, and wanted to have all the Jews and Mordecai killed, because Mordecai was the leader of all the Jews. So Haman thought of a plot that would frame Mordecai and put the children of the Jewish people, have them murdered, have them killed. So when Esther heard about this, she went before God and she prayed. Back then, when you went to the king unsummoned, you were killed right there and then. So Esther knew that her life was either on the line or God was going to come through for her. And of course, she believed that God was going to come through for her. But if it be God's will, then her life would be ended right there and then. But the thing is, if she would have been killed, then the Jewish people wouldn't have been saved. And Mordecai wouldn't have been saved as well. So there's what happened. The king stopped the killing. The king stopped her from being killed right there and then. And a dinner was prepared. And she basically told the king about her faith and told him her real name. Well, Haman tried to come against her, and he tried to come against Mordecai and the Jewish people. And he was cast out of his position, and Mordecai was put in his position. God saved his children. He saved the Jewish people. He saved Hadassah, and he saved Mordecai. Be still and know that I am God. The story of David, everybody knows this story. And if you don't, I'm about to tell you. This teenage boy was 15 years old, and King Saul was haunted by an evil spirit. David, the 15-year-old boy that I mentioned, became King Saul's armor bearer. He would play music to soothe the king's melancholy, to take away the evil spirit. God's Spirit would come upon King Saul, and it would take away the evil spirit, and he'd be filled with peace and with joy. Well, they were about to go to war with the Philistines, and the Philistines had a new champion. His name was Goliath. He was about 10 feet tall, and he was the biggest anyone had ever seen, and no one would go against him. No one would fight him. He taunted the armies of Israel. But there was one who was not afraid. There was one that knew that if he stood with God, then he would come victorious over this giant. So David pleaded with King Saul to fight Goliath. And Goliath taunted David. David took a stone in a sling and struck the forehead of Goliath, and Goliath fell down. And he took his head and fed it to the birds, as the Bible says. He was praised, and he became king. God protected the armies of Israel, David and King Saul. Be still and know that I am God. The story of Noah. All of creation had gone crazy. They were committing every bit of kind of sin that you could think of. They were destroying villages. They were destroying homes. God was disgusted with his creation. He was appalled at his creation. He was hurt. He was disgruntled. He was disappointed in his creation. So he flooded the entire world. But before he did this, there was one man who loved God with all his heart and with all his life, with everything that was in him, including his family. So God called Noah to build an ark, to put his family on it, and to put 2 of every creature of all creation on that ark, and be protected, because for 40 days and 40 nights, God would flood the world. So for 40 days and 40 nights, water came upon the whole earth, and it was flooded, and everyone was killed but the ones who were in the ark. So God protected Noah and his family and all the creatures that were on the ark. And God gave Noah the opportunity to repopulate the earth, so they could put more righteous people for God on the earth and less sinful people. Be still and know that I am God. The story of Daniel. Daniel was framed, and King Nebuchadnezzar knew that he had to put Daniel in prison, because Daniel had convinced King Nebuchadnezzar that there was a God, and that he was with Daniel. And somehow, I guess, King Nebuchadnezzar could sense the presence of God on Daniel. Maybe in some way King Nebuchadnezzar believed in God, or maybe believed in God from spending time with Daniel, I guess you could say. So he put him in the lion's den. But he believed for Daniel. He prayed for Daniel. And all night Daniel praised God. He worshiped God. He prayed to God. All night he was not touched by the lions. All night the lions' mouths were shut. And by morning they were still where they were. And their mouths were not opened. They were not. Daniel was not touched. A hair on his head was not touched. And King Nebuchadnezzar came to the door of the den and called for Daniel. He knew that Daniel would come, and he knew that God would come through for Daniel. Be still and know that I am God. Now, this next story is my favorite. The story of Paul. And there's so much of the story of Paul, so I'm not going to go through everything, so don't freak out. But Paul was put through so much. I'm going to go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24 and 28. 24 through 28. There you go. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have been in the deep. In journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils of the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Paul went through a lot, but God was there for him through everything that he went through. And he strengthened him and he pressed him on. Go to Acts 28:4. This is my favorite part of the story. Actually, I'm going to start from the top of 28 and go to verse 6. Now, when they had escaped, they then found out that the island was called Malta, and the natives showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and made us all welcome, because of the rain that was falling and because of the cold. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. So when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom thou he has escaped the sea, yet justice is not allowed to live." But he shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. However, they were expecting that he would swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But after they had looked for a long time and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. So the people on Malta, they didn't believe that God existed. They didn't believe in God, but they believed in God. So they automatically thought that Paul was a god because this snake bit him and it didn't hurt him, and he shook it off and it went into the fire. See, this is how awesome God is. This is how faithful God is. That when we trust God, he comes through for us and he's there for us, or he gets us through what we're going through. So all this that Paul went through, God was with him. And yes, his life ended in prison. His life ended in death. But God was with him the whole time, and God brought him through, and God provided for him, and God led him in his ministry. He had joy in his heart. He had peace in his heart. He had peace in his mind. I'm sure there was moments that he was mad at God and wondered why God had put him through what he put him through. But I think when it all ended, honestly, when it all ended, I believe that he was glad that he went through everything that he went through, because he knew that through all that he had went through, people were going to come to Christ. People were going to come to know him and love him with their hearts and with their lives. So this is the point of my story. This is the point of my message. Don't give up on God just because your life isn't going the way that you want it to. Don't give up on God just because things look impossible. Matthew 19:26 says all things are possible with God. And if you come across this message and you're from Hong Kong, you're from Southeast Asia, you're from India, and you're either thinking about turning your back on Christ or you have, don't. And give your life, give your heart back to God. Trust in him. Either he'll bring you through it or he'll bring you home. For I consider that the sufferings are not worthy to be compared with the glory that should be revealed in us. Romans 8:18. Heaven should be our destination. this life is but a vapor. Could be gone tomorrow. We're supposed to live every day like it's our last, as the Bible says also. So don't turn your back on Christ. Trust in Jesus. Like I said, he'll either get you through it or he'll bring you home. And mothers that have lost their babies in abortion or in miscarriages, that baby's not lost. God has that baby. And God is waiting for you to come when it's your time to come home, so you can nurse and care for that baby and help it grow. If you've lost pets, if you've lost loved ones, God has your loved one. He has your pet. Don't give up on your life. Don't give up on your purpose. I don't care what the reason is. Trust in Jesus. Be still and know that I am God. I promise you it's worth it. Guys, thank you so much for supporting this ministry. I can't do it without you. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell for all things coming up in God Speaks. Guys, this is always an honor to do this with you. It's always a joy to bring you these messages each week. I love you guys so much. I hope you have a blessed week, and I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless you guys.